Bernard Tobin here for RealAgriculture.com. We're at the Farm and Food Care annual meeting, and I'm joined by Feedstuffs journalist and commentator Andy Vance. Thanks for taking some time, Andy.
Yeah, happy to. It's been a great meeting, and I look forward to kind of chatting for a few minutes.
Awesome. So, hey, we're talking about consumers today and communicating with consumers. You drill down a little differently on this matter, talking really about how consumers make their food choices, their buying choices. And I wanted to dig into that a little bit. You basically showed a slide that 95% of people are making decisions based on taste, cost, nutrition. 4% more luxury, organic, local, and there's 1% that's a fringe. And you basically, your message is forget about the fringe.
Yeah, the trick, I think, is that we spend a lot of time and emotional energy, a lot of resources trying to move the needle with that very small percentage of the consuming public. If you think it's less than 1%, or depending on what study you look at, maybe it's slightly more than that, but certainly not a large percentage of the consuming public who are very angry, let's say, with modern food animal production practices. We could be talking about folks in the animal rights movement. We could be talking about folks who are pro-vegan, anti-meat consumption. We could be talking about folks who are perhaps anti-GMO. And these are people who are in favor of bans on different production practices and techniques. These are folks who are probably going to lead boycotts or protests. These are people who want us to be forced to change. We get very defensive around those folks, understandably. They're attacking not only our business and our livelihoods, but our way of life, our lifestyle, our passion. And so my advice is that's such a small percentage of the consuming public, and we can't move the needle with them. So it's better a lot of times to let them look like the raving lunatics on Twitter and Facebook and focus more on the people that we can influence. Those 95% of consumers who buy food based on taste, cost, and convenience, or taste, cost, and nutrition. People who go to the grocery store and buy things that their kids like to eat and go home and want to just feed their families, absent sort of these food religions and ideologies.
Now, I guess the challenge for a lot of farmers, we talk about the need for farmers to speak up and tell their stories, but unfortunately, there's a lot of farmers, that's all they hear. They hear that fringe, that negative, that anti, and they think it's bigger than that percentage. But what you're saying is the vast majority is a group that's open to a conversation.
I remember when I started on Twitter, my natural inclination was to, and granted we're talking 9 or 10 years ago now, my natural inclination was respond to every person who sent a tweet in my direction, and the people who were sort of hateful and aggressive and whatnot. And I thought it was my responsibility to go back and to answer every allegation. I started looking at the people who were coming at me, and let's say if I had 1,000 followers on Twitter, most of these folks who were really digging at me had 50 or 60 followers. And I looked and said, wait, I'm giving them a bigger platform by answering their allegations. I'm giving them an opportunity to set the terms of engagement. That's foolish. My responsibility should be to tell my story, to share the information I think is relevant, and ignore as best I can the really vocal super minority. Okay. Now, the challenge is yes, there are issues that we do need to talk about. And every issue that an activist or a crazy person, so to speak, raises isn't necessarily something we should ignore. Let's say in the swine industry, for example, I think it's very valid that we've had a conversation about sow housing. I think that's a reasonable discussion that we've had. I don't like that it was set, the terms of engagement were sort of set by our enemies and detractors. I think we need to be more proactive than that and have a lot of self-reflection and introspection and make sure we're always doing the best things for our animals and our customers. But it's an exercise in futility to constantly get in the mud and wrestle with the pigs out there on the internet.